The Covenant of Circumcision. Let us begin by settling in, softly, like the quiet evening folding around a gentle whisper. Imagine yourself in a time long ago, under wide, starlit skies, where stories travel slowly, carried by the wind and the soft steps of those who walk the earth with care. There was a man named Abram. He lived in a place far away, in a land called surrounded by walls and streets full of many people. Abram was quiet and thoughtful. Some called him a traveler, someone who listened closely to the world around him. His heart was filled with questions, hopes, and a kind of waiting, a waiting for something wonderful and mysterious. One night, as the world around him softened into shadows, Abram experienced something extraordinary. The voice of God came to him, gentle but clear, like a light shining through darkness. God spoke to Abram, calling him to leave the home and the people he knew, to journey to a new place, a place that God would show him, a land of promise and hope. God made a special promise to Abram. Though Abram did not yet have any children, God promised to make him the father of many. His family would be as numerous as the stars that blink softly above the desert night. This promise was like a seed planted deep in the earth, holding the potential for something very great, though it might not sprout quickly. Abram trusted this promise. He gathered his wife Sarai and his servants and quietly left the familiar behind. Step by careful step, he walked toward the land that God had promised. Many years passed. Abram's life was marked by journeys and moments of wonder, but also by waiting and sometimes uncertainty. He and Sarai wanted a child, but the time did not come easily. Yet Abram held on to the promise, the quiet hope that warmed his heart. Then God spoke to Abram once more, as softly as the wind over the hills. God gave Abram a new command, a sign to show the lasting bond between them. This sign was to be an act of covenant, a kind of sacred agreement, one that Abram and his descendants would carry with them, an intimate mark of their relationship with God. God asked Abram to circumcise every male in his household, himself, his sons, and all who belonged to him, including servants and anything walking in his house. It was a gentle but profound request, a physical sign that would be remembered through the generations. Abram listened carefully. This sign was not only a command but a symbol, a quiet, steady reminder of the promise made under the stars, a promise of protection, belonging, and hope. It was something to be done with trust and care, a moment of connection between heaven and earth. On that day, Abram took a sharp stone with gentle hands and steady breath. He followed God's instructions. The act itself was simple, yet filled with meaning. It was a new beginning, a link between the human and the divine, a sacred marker of faithfulness and commitment. Then God said to Abram, "You shall be the father of many nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but Abraham, for I have made you the father of many." The change of Abram's name to Abraham was like a promise blossoming into new life, a name that means father of a multitude. God also spoke to Sarai, changing her name to Sarah, meaning princess, a sign of the special place she would hold in this unfolding story. The covenant was set, a quiet and lasting bond woven into the very flesh of Abraham's family. It was a promise made in love and hope, a promise that carried through time, like the steady pulse of a heartbeat in the night. Abraham kept this covenant with gentle care, teaching those close to him about this sign and what it meant. It was a tender tradition, whispered from parent to child, a living thread connecting their lives to the divine promise made long ago. As the years passed, often wrapped in calm and quiet, Abraham and Sarah began to see the promise of God come to life in a surprising way. They had a son named Isaac, whose very name means "he laughs." His birth brought joy and wonder, a reminder that promises, even those waited for a long time, can unfold in their own perfect time. This story, this covenant, remains a gentle echo through the ages. It speaks of trust, of waiting patiently, and of the quiet, profound ways promises are kept. It is a story wrapped in the soft light of evening, inviting us to breathe slowly and softly, remembering that each moment holds the possibility of new beginnings. Let us rest now with this story as a gentle companion, carrying its calm and hope into the quiet night. The covenant made under the stars reaches across time, a whisper of love and faithfulness to cradle our dreams. In the quiet after the birth of Isaac, the household of Abraham and Sarah settled into a gentle rhythm. The days flowed easily beneath the wide, open skies of the Promised Land, a land that now felt more like home than the distant memories of Isaac's laughter, fresh and clear, filled the tents and courtyards, weaving warmth into the fabric of family life. Abraham often found himself walking beneath the vast canopy of stars, those steadfast ancient lights that first kindled his faith. Each star seemed to mirror a promise whispered long ago, a promise given and now taking form in the tiny fingers of his son. Despite the joy that Isaac's arrival brought, Abraham knew the path ahead would still hold challenges. The covenant was not just a bond born of joy, it was a solemn agreement, a living testament meant to endure through all seasons. It called for vigilance, for the nurturing of faith in uncertain times, and for the constant remembrance of God's faithfulness. Sarah, too, found strength in her new role as a mother. Her laughter joined Isaac's, an echo of joy tempered by the knowledge that the blessings she had longed for had arrived in a fragile bundle of hope. Her heart, once heavy with waiting, now blossomed with renewed life, nurturing Isaac with gentle hands and stories of the journey they had all taken. Abraham taught Isaac about the land, its silent hills and whispering winds. He spoke softly of the covenant, the sacred sign of circumcision, the trust it symbolized and the promise it sealed. Abraham's voice was a steady current of history and hope, flowing through the boy's young ears, planting seeds destined to grow in time. Around the campfires of many evenings, Abraham's servants and kin would gather. The story of God's promise, the command of circumcision, and the naming of Abraham and Sarah were retold in quiet reverence. Each retelling bound the group closer, a shared tapestry of faith and identity. The covenant was no longer just a past act. It lived in every breath, every ritual, every whispered prayer. Its mark was not visible to others, but it glittered deeply within the spirit of the people, a hidden treasure that shaped their every step. Years moved gently forward. Isaac grew strong and curious, his eyes wide with wonder. Abraham guided him with patience, teaching him the ways of the land, the meaning of faith, and the weight of their heritage. Sarah watched with pride and a subtle sense of awe at how the fragile promise had become so resilient through love and trust. And still Abraham lifted his eyes to the heavens, counting stars in silent communion. Each star was a promise renewed, shining certain and true against the darkness of night. The covenant's significance deepened with time. When Abraham's sons grew into men, they too underwent the sacred rite. Through their bloodlines, the sacred bond extended onward, an unbroken chain linking generations in faith and obedience. Abraham's heart understood something sacred, that God's promises might stretch beyond a single lifetime, beyond the borders of the present. They reached into the soul of the future, inviting every step forward to be taken with trust and humility. One evening, as the sun painted the horizon with hues of soft gold and rose, Abraham gathered with his family beneath the ancient oak trees. The gentle breeze seemed to carry whispers of the past and quiet hope of tomorrow. He spoke to them, his voice calm and steady. "This covenant," he said, "is the spine of our story, the bond that holds us together. It is more than law, it is love. It is the thread that weaves us into God's promise, a promise that lives long after we are gone." Sarah nodded beside him, her eyes reflecting the fading light, her smile touched with quiet contentment. Isaac, now a young man, listened intently. He understood the weight of responsibility and the blessing entrusted to him. Together, they formed a circle of faith, rooted deeply in the earth beneath their feet, reaching toward the heavens above. The days that followed brought a peaceful stillness, moments of reflection that stirred the heart. Abraham often spoke with God in quiet prayer, seeking strength to continue walking the path laid out before him. The covenant, once sealed in a single act, had grown into a living legacy, one that would ripple through time, touching the lives of countless souls who would one day look back and find in it their own source of hope and belonging. As Abraham's life gently drew toward its close, he faced it without fear. His trust remained unshaken, his faith steady as the stars above. He knew that he had done all he could to honor the covenant, to nurture the promise God had given. And in the quiet fullness of those final days, surrounded by family and the vastness of the land, Abraham felt the deep peace that comes from walking faithfully in the light of a divine promise. The covenant of circumcision, born of a command and sealed with obedience, had become a symbol that pulsed through generations. It was a testimony of trust, a reminder that patience yields fulfillment, and that love woven with faith can endure beyond the confines of time. When Abraham's spirit gently passed from this life, the covenant remained, a steady beacon for those who followed, guiding them through the shadows and the light, connecting them forever to the God who calls and keeps his promises. And so, the story continues, quiet, enduring, an eternal whisper beneath every star, in the hearts of a multitude. The covenant of circumcision stands, not merely as a mark upon the flesh, but as a sacred thread sewn into the very soul of a people, binding past to future, earth to heaven, hope to fulfillment. It whispers still, trust, endure, and believe. God's promises are sure, and his love eternal. As the seasons passed beyond Abraham's life, the covenant of circumcision continued to be observed with reverence and care. Within the homes of his descendants, the sacred ritual was performed, not merely as a custom, but as a profound reminder of the promises made at the dawn of their lineage. Fathers would gather their sons, their youngest infants cradled gently in their arms, and explain why this act was essential, why it marked them as part of something greater than themselves. Isaac, now a man seasoned by his own journey, embodied the faith inherited from his father. He walked with a quiet dignity, mindful of the responsibility placed on him to nurture the covenant. With Rebekah by his side, Isaac raised his children in the knowledge that they were part of a divine story, stretching back to a time when God's voice had called on Abraham. Together, they taught their sons that through this act of circumcision, their connection to God was renewed, a connection grounded in promises of blessing and protection. Life moved gently forward, with moments of joy and sorrow weaving the tapestry of their days. Sarah's memory lingered warmly among the family, her faith a quiet flame carried forward by those she loved. The covenant, now a living legacy, brought comfort in times of uncertainty and hope when the horizon seemed dim. It was more than a mark, it was a covenantal embrace of the past's faithfulness and the future's promise. One evening, beneath a canopy of stars untouched by the world's noise, Isaac sat with his sons, his voice soft but deliberate as he shared the story of their ancestry. "Remember," he would say, "that God made a promise to your grandfather Abraham, a promise sealed with a sign that shows we belong to him. Each time this covenant is kept, we acknowledge that promise, and we walk in the footsteps of those who came before us." This gentle affirmation became the rhythm of their lives, an unbroken cadence that whispered across generations. As the boys grew into men, they too embraced the covenant, understanding its place in the very core of their identity. The years allowed the family to witness the unfolding of God's faithfulness in countless quiet ways. Fields yielded harvests when drought seemed near. Sorrows were softened by the grace that accompanied them. And through it all, the covenant stood firm, a silent guiding light in an often unpredictable world. Within moments of stillness and reflection, the descendants found strength not only in the promise, but also in the community that bound them together. Stories were shared during gatherings, prayers recited with heartfelt conviction, and the covenant was spoken of with deep respect. It was the common thread that wove their hearts into a tapestry of devotion. Isaac's son Jacob, too, felt the weight of this legacy. Guided by the lessons passed down through his father's teachings, Jacob's heart was tender and resolute. He understood the covenant as an enduring bond that extended beyond mere ritual, to the spiritual covenant that joined their family to God's eternal purpose. In moments of contemplation, Jacob saw his own place within the unfolding narrative, a narrative that would one day stretch far beyond the borders of their immediate world. In times of trial, when the future seemed uncertain, Jacob would often reflect upon the stories of Abraham and Isaac. Their unwavering faith, their trust in the unseen, became beacons of hope. The covenant was not simply a protocol of the past, but a living promise that strengthened their courage and conviction. And so, as Jacob journeyed through his own challenges, he carried the covenant with him, a sacred reminder etched not only on his flesh, but etched deeper within his heart. The family's journey was marked by quiet moments of worship, some beneath shade trees, others beside flowing streams, or in the cool shadow of mountains. Wherever they gathered, the covenant came alive in song and prayer, in the telling of ancient promises, and in the loving embrace of those who shared the same sacred bond. The rhythms of faith connected them, generation after generation. With every child born, the act of circumcision was performed with the same reverent touch that Abraham once commanded, a tenderness that spoke of love and acceptance. Each boy was welcomed into the fold not just by family, but by the timeless promise that bound them all, a promise that transcended challenges and celebrated the hope of blessings yet to come. Jacob, reflective and faithful, often thought of how the covenant shaped not only his family, but the very fabric of their lives. It was a covenant of grace, a covenant that called for trust and obedience, but also offered profound belonging and purpose. In his quieter moments, he would gaze once more at the stars, those same stars his forefather watched, feeling the weight and wonder of God's promises stretching endlessly beyond the heavens. The stories of the covenant, of Abraham and Isaac, were not just recited, they were lived. Their legacy echoed through the lives of all who embraced the sign, a reminder to stand firm in faith when the path was uncertain. Each circumcision was both an act of identity and an expression of hope, a physical reminder that they were God's chosen, called to walk in his ways. As time marched forward and Jacob's children grew, the covenant grew with them, continuing to be a source of strength. Its significance was reaffirmed anew in each generation, a beacon that shone through times of peace and hardship alike. The covenant was a bridge between the past and the future, each act a promise made anew to the God who makes all things possible. And though the story of Abraham's family would unfold in unexpected ways, the covenant of circumcision remained a constant, a sacred trust, passed quietly from father to son, from one generation to the next. It was a gentle, enduring thread tying their lives to a divine promise that neither time nor circumstance could undo. The quiet beauty of this legacy lingered gently in the hearts of all who bore the sign. It was a covenant of belonging, of faithfulness, and of love, a covenant that whispered through the stillness of the night and glowed softly in the warmth of the dawn. And so, in the embrace of this promise, the family moved forward, steady and sure, an unbroken line, a living testament to the faith of one man called Abraham, who dared to trust a promise that stretched beyond his lifetime, carried forth in the covenant that marked them all. In the quiet hours around the flickering embers of the evening fire, Jacob often found these moments richest for reflection. The stars above stretched vast and quiet, an enduring tapestry of light, echoing the promises etched deep within their hearts. The covenant was alive in the whispers of wind through the trees, in the songs of birds greeting dawn, and in the laughter of children who carried the future upon their shoulders. Jacob observed how the covenant shaped more than ceremony. It shaped daily life. It lived not only in the act of circumcision, but in the very rhythm of their days, how they greeted morning light, shared meals seasoned with gratitude, and spoke truths with gentle honesty. Each act of kindness, each moment of forgiveness, and each prayer whispered in solitude strengthened the invisible thread woven through generations. The sacred sign upon the flesh was a visible reminder, but it was faith, alive and breathing, that bound them most tightly. Jacob taught his sons to see beyond the ritual, to hear the covenant's voice calling them toward righteousness, humility, and steadfast love. It was a call to stand firm when storms roared, to offer grace when wrongs were done, and to walk always in the quiet assurance of God's presence. The covenant also carried a solemn responsibility. Jacob reminded his children that their covenant was a lamp to their feet, a light to their path. It was not a shield that could protect from every hardship, but a compass guiding their hearts toward hope. When famine shadowed the land, or when disputes wove tension among kin, the covenant's legacy was the steady pulse that reminded them who they were, people chosen, called to trust in what was promised beyond what was seen. In times of celebration, the family gathered beneath skies brushed with twilight hues, voices lifted in harmonious praise. These gatherings were more than joyous occasions. They were affirmations of identity and unity. The stories of Abraham's faith were retold with reverence, each telling breathing life into the old promises, making them vivid and immediate for the young ears listening close. Jacob's heart held a gentle hope that each new generation would embrace the covenant, not as a burden but as a gift, a sacred dialogue between heaven and earth. He knew faith could sometimes feel like walking in a wilderness, uncertain and tiring, yet the covenant was the steady hand reaching forward in the dark, a promise that dawn follows even the longest night. The simplicity of desert mornings, the softness of olive groves, and the cool shade where the family rested became the backdrop for their prayers. Here, in nature's quiet sanctuaries, the covenant thrived, not as a distant tradition but as a living history shaping every heartbeat. As seasons turned, Jacob witnessed his own children embracing the covenant in quiet ways, through acts of mercy, heartfelt prayers, and the gentle passing of stories from old to young. He saw in their eyes the same spark that Abraham once held, a trust in God's promise that transcended fear and doubt. The covenant was a song with many verses, sung with variations, but the same melody of faith. Its rhythm was peace, its chorus hope. Through every hardship and blessing, it remained the family's sacred inheritance, an echo of divine love and a steady reminder that God's promise was sure. In the stillness of twilight, Jacob often sat alone, heart full, mind calm. He heard the distant laughter of children, the rustle of leaves stirred by a kind breeze, and in these gentle sounds, the covenant's truth was clear. They were never alone. The torch passed faithfully from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, and now to his sons, each bearing the sacred sign with quiet honor and deep gratitude. This trust, unbroken and unyielding, wove them together through time, a living testimony to a promise made in ages past. As Jacob contemplated the years behind him and the uncertain path ahead, a soft peace settled over his spirit. The covenant was a covenant of grace touching all who embraced it, a sacred gift of belonging and purpose held tenderly within their souls. Thus the story continued, not simply as history but as life breathed anew with each dawn, a sacred trust carried forward by faithful hands, an enduring bond linking the generations in love, promise, and hope. Jacob found himself seated beneath the spreading branches of an ancient oak. The breeze whispered softly, carrying scents of wild thyme and cedar, a reminder of the earth's quiet blessings. Here, amid the rhythmic pulse of nature, his thoughts often settled on the covenant, that sacred bond woven through the generations like the very breath of morning mist. He watched his children at play, their laughter a melody intertwined with the song of the birds. Each smile, each shared glance, seemed to echo the promises made so long ago to Abraham, the promise not just of descendants, but of a people bound by more than blood. The covenant was alive within them, a living dialogue that transcended the passing of years, embracing every act of kindness, every word spoken in love. Jacob's heart was full, yet he knew the path ahead was not without challenge. Hardships had tested their unity before, famine had tightened its grip, and disputes had stirred shadows within their camp. Yet through every trial, the covenant had been their anchor, steadying their spirits and guiding their hands. It was this steadfastness he sought to instill most deeply in his sons, that unwavering faithfulness not only to God, but to one another. Each evening as the sun dipped low, casting hues of amber and rose across the sky, Jacob gathered his family close. Around a flickering firelight, he recounted the faith of Abraham, the journey of Isaac, the covenant renewed and cherished anew. These were not mere stories, but living threads that connected every listener to a shared purpose and destiny. Jacob often reminded his sons that circumcision was more than tradition. It was the outward sign of an inward commitment. Yet he pressed on the truth that the covenant's strength was not in ritual alone. It was found in daily acts, in forgiving a brother's misstep, in extending mercy to the stranger, in humble prayers offered without ceasing. These were the ways the covenant breathed life. Sometimes, as silence settled deep into the camp, Jacob felt a profound peace. In those moments, the weight of the covenant was gentle upon his soul, a quiet assurance that the promises God made were unshakable. He envisioned the lines stretching forward, beyond his sight, where countless generations would carry the same sacred trust. The land itself seemed to honor this covenant. Streams flowed with clear water, fields yielded grain in abundance, and the skies painted endless canvases of hope. Nature became a sanctuary, a hallowed space where the covenant's story thrived as a living history, whispered from leaf to stone, from star to shadow. Jacob found joy in witnessing his children embrace this heritage. Whether sharing bread and stories, extending a helping hand, or kneeling together in prayer at dawn, they embodied the covenant's essence. Their lives were hymns of faith, peace, and steadfast love, resounding through the passage of years like a sacred chorus. In quiet reflection, Jacob marveled at the grace that had sustained his family. He understood that this gift was fragile, yet enduring, requiring deliberate nurturing through faithfulness. It was a covenant not only tied to their ancestors, but woven deeply into the rhythm of each heartbeat and breath. With the rising moon casting a silver glow, Jacob's thoughts turned toward the future. He prayed that the generations yet unborn would cherish this covenant as he had, living it fully with humility and joy. That they might find strength in God's promises and courage in their shared journey. As dawn approached, the world whispered a gentle blessing over the camp. Jacob closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of life within him and around him, an unbroken chain of love and promise. In that sacred stillness, his soul rested, anchored firmly by the covenant of circumcision, and inspired to walk in its light with steadfast devotion. Even as twilight deepened into night, Jacob's heart remained tethered to the covenant's sacred truth. The flickering embers of the fire painted shadows on the faces of his sons, wide-eyed and eager to receive the wisdom of their heritage. He spoke softly, his voice steady, weaving the ancient promises into the tapestry of their present lives. The covenant is not simply a mark upon the flesh, he said, but a bond of the spirit, a promise made from one generation to the next. It is the assurance that God's hand guides us and that we belong to him, bound by love and obedience. He looked towards the heavens, luminous with countless stars, names whispered by their ancestors now carried on the wind. Each gleaming light, he continued, reminds us of Abraham, whose faith opened the way for us all. That faith, dear sons, must shine within your hearts, even when the path appears clouded. A gentle silence settled, broken only by the night's stillness and the soft breathing of sleeping children nearby. Jacob's thoughts drifted to the years of hardship their family had endured, when famine stole from their granaries and strife threatened to unravel their unity. Yet through it all, the covenant had been a steady anchor, not because it was an unbreakable shield, but because it fostered trust in a God who never abandoned them. He sighed, a bittersweet blend of fatigue and peace. Remember, he urged, our strength is not in how fiercely we guard the land or defend one another. True strength flows from kindness, from mercy shown to the stranger and the downtrodden, and from forgiveness freely given. The covenant calls us to live humbly, with hearts wide open to God and to each other. Leaning closer, he traced the symbols of the earth beneath his finger, the soil warm from the day's sun. This land, fertile and rich, is a gift, a sign of God's blessing. But its fruitfulness depends on us. We must tend it with care, just as we must tend our faith. Both will wither if forgotten or neglected. Jacob's gaze settled on his children once more, noting the laughter that had returned as they chased one another beneath the moonlight. The sound was a wellspring of hope. To nurture the covenant is to nurture this joy, he whispered, his voice fading into the night. To ensure every child grows in an understanding that life flourishes through love and faithfulness. He recalled the words taught by the elders, words echoing through time like a refrain, of Abraham's unwavering commitment and Isaac's quiet obedience. Stories which were more than history. They were living lessons, breathed anew each day. Jacob felt honored to be their vessel. In a rare moment of quiet gratitude, he reflected on the peace that had begun to stir within him, a deep wellspring beneath doubt and worry. The covenant was both shield and light, a promise that transcended personal trials and family discord. My sons, he said softly, I pray for you not only to carry this covenant, but to cherish it like a precious flame. It warms the soul, illuminates the darkness, and guides your steps. Do not let it flicker in the winds of hardship or doubt. Guard it with humility and joy. As the fire's glow waned and eyelids grew heavy, Jacob felt himself cradled in a quiet strength, as though the very earth hummed beneath him in agreement. He visualized future gatherings, children he did not yet know, listening beneath stars, learning the sacred bond that shaped their lives. He whispered a prayer, serene and steady, a gentle petition carried on the breath of night, that in every heart the covenant would find home, that kindness and faith would blossom endlessly, and that the ancient promise would remain their enduring song. With that, Jacob rested beneath the vast sky, his spirit anchored, steady and sure in the promise that with God they would walk on in light, together always, toward a tomorrow gently shaped by faith. Jacob's voice quieted, but the warmth of his words lingered, like the soft glow of embers welcoming the night. The boys leaned closer, their eyes wide with wonder and the gentle seriousness that comes when the heart feels something sacred. "Remember," Jacob said softly, "the covenant is not bound by time or place alone." He gestured toward the hills around them, their silhouettes softened by the twilight. "It lives within us, in our thoughts, our actions, our care for one another. It is a living promise, held close in the depths of the soul." He let a stillness settle, inviting the weight of the message to grow deep roots. "The covenant asks us to look beyond what can be seen," Jacob breathed, "to the unseen hand that guides even in days of hardship and silence. When you face storms, and you will, do not lose sight of this. Trust that the divine is weaving your story through every challenge and every blessing." The youngest son, quieter than the rest, but listening intently, raised a small hand. "Father, how can we remember always when days are hard, when our hearts feel tired or afraid?" Jacob smiled gently, touched by the honesty of the question. "That is the heart of faith," he answered slowly, mindful of each word, "to hold fast even when the path is shadowed. We remember by holding in our hearts the stories passed down, Abraham's courage, Isaac's obedience, your grandfather's kindness. Tell these stories often. Speak them aloud beside the fire. Share them in your own words. They are lifelines." He reached into his cloak and drew out a small, smooth stone, worn by years in his hand. "This stone is a symbol," he said. "Like the rock altars built by our forebears to mark God's promises, it rests here with you now, to remind you that each promise is as steady and enduring as stone beneath our feet." Jacob pressed the stone gently into the hands of his eldest son. "Carry this with you when you travel. Let it remind you of what you have heard this night, and more importantly of what you carry in your heart." A soft breeze stirred the olive branches above, whispering through their leaves as if nature itself listened with reverence. "Kindness, mercy, and forgiveness," Jacob continued. "These are the sacred fruits of the covenant. They bind us to one another and to God. Look after them as carefully as you tend the vineyards and fields, for without these, all the land we hold dear will wither, and the promise itself can fade." He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from his son's forehead, a tender father's touch. "You may wonder how such simple things, kindness in word, mercy in deed, can be strength. But remember, true strength is often quiet. It is a river flowing beneath the rocks, steady and nourishing. It softens the hardest stones, heals the deepest wounds, and opens closed hearts." Jacob paused, his eyes glazing with memory and hope mingled. "When famine came, when we wandered far from home, it was never our weapons that saved us, but our trust in the promise and in each other. Your mother's prayers, your brother's laughter, strangers' hands offered in friendship, these bore us through." His voice dropped to a breath, almost a whisper. "Never forget that to hold the covenant means to live it daily, in how you treat friend and stranger alike, in how you forgive and seek peace, even when anger is near." He looked at each son, every face marked by the flickering firelight and shadows, their youth a promise itself. "You are the keepers now, not just of the land or the words carved in scrolls, but of the spirit, the living flame passed down through generations. It is a flame that neither wind nor storm can extinguish if tendered with courage and love." Jacob's heart swelled as he envisioned a lineage stretching far beyond what eyes could see, a chain of souls bound in faith and kindness. When you gather your own children beneath these same stars, share this story, our story. Teach them the secret of the covenant. It is both an anchor and a sail. It grounds us when seas are rough and lifts us toward new horizons. He stood slowly, the rhythm of age and strength mingled in his steps. The night stretched wide around them, a deep velvet sky sparkling with quiet brilliance. "May the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, guide your paths," he whispered. "May your hands be steady, your hearts open, your minds at peace, and may the covenant be a shield not only of flesh, but of spirit, guarding you as you walk through valleys and climb mountain heights." A gentle hush fell, the boys asleep in thought. Jacob knelt once more, the weight of years and promises resting on his shoulders. With a final breath, he prayed for humility, to serve, to love with a deep and steady joy that outshines fleeting sorrows. The covenant was not a chain but a blessing, a sacred trust enveloping the past, present, and all tomorrows. Cradled by the night, the ancient promise carried a quiet echo, enduring as the stones, as the stars, shimmering beyond the reach of time. As twilight brushed the edges of the sky with soft hues of rose and gold, Jacob's voice softened to a whisper, a gentle breeze moving through the olive branches that surrounded them. He looked each son in the eye, the weight of years and wisdom settling into every word. "Remember," he said, "the covenant we live by is not a crown worn for show, but a quiet fire that warms our hearts and lights our steps in the darkest nights." He motioned toward the smooth stone he had given to Reuben, now resting calmly in his palm. "This stone is a promise carved by time, shaped by the waters of patience and trust. It will weather storms and drought, just as your faith must endure the trials ahead. When you touch it, may you recall not only the strength of our forefathers, but the gentle mercy with which we must treat each other." The sons nodded, the stillness around them a testament to the gravity of the moment. Levi, the quietest of all, spoke softly, "Father, you have taught us to carry kindness before our might. How shall we guard this kindness when faced with anger or cruelty?" Jacob looked toward the horizon where faint stars began to prick the darkening sky. "Kindness is not weakness," he replied. "It is the deepest strength, a river that shapes even the hardest stone over time. When anger rises, breathe deeply and choose mercy. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but it opens the path forward, healing wounds that otherwise grow bitter and wide." Benjamin, the youngest, leaned closer. "And the stories, Father, the stories of our ancestors, how do they hold us steady?" They all turned to hear Jacob's reply, for the tale of their people was the thread weaving their hearts together. "All our ancestors' lives were woven with hopes and fears much like our own," he replied. "Their courage in famine, their trust when the land was barren, their faith when the way was hidden. These stories are a lantern hung in the night, a steady glow that never dims. Each time you tell them, you breathe new life into that light, passing it forward beyond your own days." A quiet resolve settled upon the brothers, intertwined with their father's blessing. Jacob's gaze softened further. "This covenant binds us beyond blood," he continued, "into the great circle of life, where each act of kindness, every forgiving word, every moment of peace, is an echo of the promises made long ago. To live the covenant means to be the salt of the earth, preserving the goodness in this world." The night air cooled, carrying a faint scent of myrtle and sage, and Jacob's voice became almost a prayer. "May your hands be gentle yet firm, your words wise yet kind. May humility be your crown and peace your shield, for in doing so you honor not just what has been, but what shall be, a future shaped by faith and love." A cool calm settled over the company like a soft cloak, the silence only touched by the subtle rustling of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. Jacob's sons sat close, the echo of their father's words sinking deep into their hearts. He looked at each of them, eyes shimmering with hope, the lineage of their heritage palpable in that moment. "You are the keepers, not only of land or laws, but of a sacred spirit that breathes life into our days. Carry it well. Let it shape your thoughts and actions, turning even the simplest moments into steps on the path of righteousness." The eldest cradled the stone again, a symbol not just of promise, but of legacy. It was a gift meant to pass from hand to hand, story to story, until the end of time. Jacob's breath was steady, his spirit calm, anchored in the certainty that this covenant was more than a ritual. It was the living heartbeat of their people. As darkness wrapped around the hills and stars blossomed overhead, like scattered seeds of light, Jacob's voice fell to a quiet murmur, like a gentle lullaby. "Let your faith be both anchor and sail, grounding you when storms come, guiding you toward horizons yet unseen. And may the kindness born of this covenant ripple through the ages, softening harder hearts, mending broken bonds, and weaving a fabric of peace that stretches beyond all measure." The sons each felt a sacred thrill, a quiet fire kindled within, slow and steady. It was a flame that promised warmth through the coldest nights, guidance when the path was lost, and strength not in loud triumph, but in humble endurance. As they prepared to rest, the father's final words lingered like a benediction. "Carry these truths with you always. Let them dwell in your homes and hearts, in your laughter and tears. For the covenant lives where love endures, where mercy is given freely, and where every soul walks gently in the light of our Creator's gaze." The night murmured on, a sacred pause between what was and what would be. The covenant was sealed, not with loud fanfare, but with the quiet surety of a steady hand, a loving heart, and an enduring faith. And thus, As the stars turned their silent vigil above, the promise of kindness and trust was carried forward, an everlasting blessing beyond the reach of time. As the evening deepened, a gentle hush settled over the room. Jacob's voice softened even further, weaving the final threads of his teaching into a tapestry of quiet assurance. "My sons," he said, "you have heard much tonight about kindness, about mercy given freely, and strength clothed in gentleness. But you must remember, this covenant is more than words alone. It is the breath that fills your body, the heartbeat that sustains your steps." He looked upon each face in turn, catching the flicker of understanding in their eyes. "In the days to come, when trials rise like storm winds and the world feels heavy, it will be your kindness that steadies you. Not the hardness of hands or the sharpness of tongue, but the gentle touch that softens another's pain." Jacob's hand rested lightly on the rough stone he had given them, a silent witness to their legacy. "This stone carries the story of who you are, where you came from, and who you are becoming. Carry it as you would carry your faith, close to your heart." Benjamin's expression grew thoughtful. "Father, how do we keep kindness when others choose cruelty? How do we hold mercy when the world is harsh?" Jacob smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "That is the test, son. It is not always easy to extend your hand to one who might strike it. But remember, mercy is a seed. Plant it not in the soil already soft and ready, but in places worn hard by bitterness and pain. Over time, even the most stubborn ground can bloom." A quiet peace filled the room. The sons mulled over his words, savoring the calm resolve his voice inspired. It was not a prideful boasting, but a humble courage, the courage to choose gentle strength in defiance of cruelty. Jacob's gaze turned upward, as though seeking the wisdom in the stars beyond their sheltering roof. "Faith, my children, is not just the belief in what cannot be seen. It is the trust that your actions, grounded in kindness, will carry you through unseen storms. Like a tree rooted deeply, you too will stand firm when winds blow harsh." He leaned forward slightly. "But do not mistake faith for passivity. It is an active force, a flame that must be tended with love and truth. It will guide your decisions, whisper to your heart when silence is hardest to hear." The room seemed to breathe with this truth. It wrapped around them like a soft cloak, easing the weight of future burdens. "In all things," Jacob said, voice now a quiet murmur, "let humility be your companion. Pride builds walls, humility builds bridges. When you embrace humility, you open the door for learning, for healing, for unity." One of the younger brothers broke the silence softly. "Father, will we ever be perfect in kindness?" Jacob chuckled gently, a sound like a slow stream over smooth stones. "Perfect? No, that is not the measure. You will stumble, you will fail, perhaps often, but each time you rise with a heart willing to try again, you live the covenant more fully." He lifted his hand, gesturing at the circle they formed. "The covenant is a living promise. It breathes with your every choice. It grows in the moments when you choose peace over revenge, understanding over judgment." The sons looked at one another, quiet determination beginning to ignite in their eyes. "Kindness is the true strength that outlasts swords and shields," Jacob continued. "It mends what war has torn, builds what fear would destroy. It connects the past to the future, binding hearts across generations." He paused, allowing his words to settle like warm sunlight. "Do not carry this simply as a burden or duty. Instead, carry it as a gift given and received in the same breath. In kindness, you reveal the divine spark within yourselves and others." Jacob's voice grew softer still, the room now steeped in a reverent calm. "May this covenant guide your steps through life-shifting tides. May it give you the courage to be gentle and the wisdom to be forgiving. And when your days grow weary, may it offer rest and renewal like a quiet stream." He placed his hands once more upon the stones before them. "Know that you walk not alone, but with your ancestors beside you, their faith lighting the path. And, should you falter, the covenant is there, ready to lift you, steady you, call you home." Benjamin looked up and whispered, "Father, I will hold these truths close. I will be kind, even when it is hard." Jacob's eyes shone softly in the dim light. "That is all I ask, my son, for kindness is the covenant's heart, and from its beating, peace will bloom." The brothers sat together in peaceful silence, the gentle, steady rhythm of their breathing blending into the night's quiet. The stone tokens lay between them, a tangible pulse of the legacy they were entrusted to bear. As sleep approached, Jacob's final blessing fell like a soft feather on their souls. Walk in kindness, live in faith, carry the covenant always, and may everlasting blessing be your horizon beyond the sunset, and your dawn beyond every night. The circle of brothers closed their eyes, carrying into dream the covenant of gentle strength and enduring love, a promise whispered on their breath, held fast in their hearts. The evening waned, but the light of their covenant, muted, sure, unending, burned softly still, a living bond beyond all time. As the last light of day softened into a quiet twilight, the circle of brothers sat in peaceful silence, the heaviness of words given and received settling like a gentle cloak over their hearts. Jacob's voice had traced the path from pain to peace, from doubt to faith, weaving a tapestry of hope that stretched back through their ancestors and forward into the silent promise of days yet to dawn. Benjamin, still holding the strength of new resolve, felt the weight and warmth of that covenant settle within him, not as a burden, but as a call. There was a sacred rhythm in this calling, a pulse that mirrored the steady beat of the earth beneath them. It was a call to live kindly, to sow understanding where the soil was harsh and rocky, to tend the tender shoots of gentleness, even when storms threatened. Remember, Jacob's quiet voice broke the stillness. Our journey together is not paved with certainty. The road will twist, and sometimes our steps will falter. But our hearts, our willingness to choose kindness over fear, peace over division, that is our unshakable foundation. This covenant is not a stone carved in time, but a seed planted deep within. The brothers listened, each heart gathering the weight of the promise. It was a covenant not just made in words, but lived in moments, the shared breath between frustration and patience, the decision to forgive when anger rose like a tidal wave, the choice to reach out when walls were built too high. Jacob continued softly, "In these moments, faith is not a distant certainty, but the quiet flame you keep burning within. When darkness surrounds you, and the world seems harsh and unforgiving, let that flame guide your hand and steady your spirit." Seeing in them the reflection of his own hope, an echo of his own fears gently lifted by shared courage. "I will carry this flame," he said, voice steady and clear. "Even when the night is long and the winds howl, I will carry it. For in kindness there is life, in faith there is strength." Jacob nodded, a slow smile of deep pride touching his eyes. And so our covenant grows, not as a monument to perfection, but as a living story, written each day by your choices. The choices to listen more than we speak, to seek understanding beyond our differences, to hold gently the hearts of others, including our own. The brothers leaned closer, the warmth of their fellowship wrapping around them like a quiet song. It was a song without words, a melody of belonging, resilience, and shared purpose. A melody that would carry them through the seasons ahead, through harvests and hardships, through joy and sorrow. "Let kindness be your legacy," Jacob whispered, "not as a fleeting gesture, but as an enduring strength that mends what is broken, that bridges divides, that invites the divine into each fragile moment." Benjamin felt these words settle in the core of his being. A legacy, not just to be spoken of in stories or remembered in days of celebration, but to live in each breath, each act, to become the very fiber of his life. As moonlight brushed the landscape with silver grace, the brothers rose slowly, a quiet reverence in their movements. They stepped forward into the night, a shared journey, bound by a covenant that was less a burden and more a blessing to carry the light of kindness into a world often dimmed by pain. Jacob's final blessing was a whisper on their lips as they parted, a touchstone for their souls. "Walk kindly, live faithfully, and carry this covenant forever. In your hands it will never fade. It is the promise of our ancestors, the hope of our children, and the gift of the divine." Benjamin looked upward once more, the stars like scattered sparks of the same flame burning within him, steady, steadfast, alive. He breathed deeply, feeling the covenant's quiet strength flow through his veins, a river of gentle courage ready to shape the days ahead. The night held no fear, only the soft assurance of a path lit by kindness, faith, and humility, a path walked not alone, but together, forever bound by the living covenant of the heart.